Well, hi everyone. Welcome to another installment of our Future of Real Estate series. I'm Rachel Allard, SVP of Strategy at Union Street Media, and I'm here today with a really exciting guest, Kevin Van Eck, who is the EVP of Innovation and Education at Properties. So welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you because I don't think I've ever met anyone with the title of EVP of Innovation and Education. Can you explain to everyone before we jump into the meat of our conversation what you do and what that means?
Sure. Yeah. I think, the title sort of demonstrates the value that App Properties provides and the focus that we have on those two things specifically, innovation and education. And they really fit in with our core values at App Properties. So for me, that really is what I'm focused on. We're a flat organization, as most brokerages are, so everybody has a lot of roles. But for me, the main focus is on training and coaching, and that is helping our current agents, develop and grow. The second would be the innovation part, which is determining for us what technology we either buy or build, because we've built most of our own technology. And then beyond that, it's really about company growth. So whether that's in terms of recruiting or internal growth with the agents we have, that really sums up what we do. And I work very closely with our other departments, mainly our marketing department.
Awesome. Well, that definitely helps me understand it a little better. And I think that this year, probably more than given what we're going through, all brokerages probably wish they had a Kevin or an EVP of Innovation and Education. So how in demand are you this year now? Stated differently. How has this year changed, at Properties and also your role? I know you're fairly new with the team there. So kind of what have your main priorities been?
Yeah, I think the main priorities, for us, I think we had a lot of the things in place already. I mentioned that we've built most of our own technology. So we have an end-to-end platform when it comes from, to transactions, marketing, branding, and it's called Platform. And so that has always existed. So agents have been able to work remotely without having to come into the office or turn anything in. So I think we were prepared for what's happened over the last 6 months in that way. But I think the big shift has really been training and coaching. And to that point, training and coaching really leads to company culture. And so I think that's been one of the biggest challenges when you don't have people in offices, when you don't have sales meetings in person where people are seeing each other and interacting. It's really, a lot of folks can feel like they're on an island all by themselves. So that's really what we've been focusing on is, okay, how do we still bring people together to where they feel like a sense of community that we're all in this together?
I can definitely relate. That's what many, as I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, have been stating as one of their biggest challenges. And, a lot of people who are calling all, thousands of their agents to check in. A lot of people who've gone to weekly sales meetings instead of monthly or quarterly, or who are just doing a lot more virtual happy hours, like things like that. So
Right.
I'm curious if you have a couple of examples of things that also, speaking of culture, that you actually realized you had to do them because of COVID, but maybe there are things that actually you really want to keep doing once you get past all this because they were things you should have been or you wished you had been doing all along.
Yeah, I think that's, for us, one of the things that we did, and this is a good story about be careful about what you start because you do have to finish it. We started the end of March, right after the shelter in place went into place in Michigan and Illinois, Wisconsin, in our markets. And we started a daily show that was typically live, sometimes recorded, but every morning at 6:30 a.m., myself and a colleague would do a daily show to put out to agents that helped make them feel more connected. And hopefully, the feedback we got is that it also kept agents from feeling paralyzed by what was going on around them, a constant flow of information. So, a daily show, I think we did 60 some episodes total. Which every day at 6:30 a.m. filming during the weekdays. That was it was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun because we were able to interact and connect with agents we wouldn't have been able to if we weren't in a shelter in place. So that's something we're continuing, not necessarily daily. We've turned it into a weekly show now. where we record and we have guests, and it's not live any longer for that. But the other things we have done, and we're still doing virtual sales meetings, and also virtual office meetings, of course. And then for all of our training, it's a challenge. Everyone's having whatever they call it, Zoom exhaustion, Zoom burnout, right? From that, for us, it's been really interesting because it's helped us be able to really hone in on the content to ensure there are takeaways, to make sure that hour-long Zooms are not what people are interested in. So making sure that the content is really, really powerful and valuable, with takeaways that agents can use right away, so they don't feel like they need to sit through a 90-minute Zoom to learn something.
Yeah, I think those are really great reminders. Some of it is kind of the basic pieces of remember you have to finish what you started, and also tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, tell them what you told them. But beyond your career as the next Jon Stewart or Trevor Noah, I am curious because we dove right in, if you could take us back a few steps to how you got started. You've actually owned your own brokerage, I believe, correct, Goose Island, or run it, and run an office. And so you actually have been on the sort of the broker side, as well as now inside supporting the business. So tell us how you got started and sort of walk us through your shift into your current role.
Sure. Yeah, I started in real estate in 2007. I had previously been in hospitality and the restaurant industry, service industry, with a few different companies that were franchising. And I personally saw the downturn coming because it was already happening on the West Coast. So it's sort of like I feel very grateful for the decision I made, but at the time, very scary, because getting into real estate in 2007 was not the smartest idea if you were to look at it on paper. But I saw an opportunity, and people around me questioned what I was doing. I wouldn't say I didn't have any foresight. I think I thought that there was going to be an opportunity, right? Anytime there's a crash, there's always a rebound. There's an opportunity. The rebound didn't come so quickly then, but what I did learn is how to run a successful, as an agent, run a successful business. And so I joined at Properties as a broker. I sold with clients from 2008 to 2012. And then they convinced me to come to the staff side. And I started out training and managing a small office, and ended up managing the largest office in Illinois, which was the Goose Island office that you mentioned. It was a $1.2 billion office, nearly 400 agents out of it. So I think that being a broker ahead of time, certainly helped me manage an office and help agents grow, clearly, because I understood what agents go through. But now moving beyond managing an office into more of a higher level support role in terms of what we develop, I think my career has really prepped me for this, where I'm able, because I understand the agent's timeline, the agent's life cycle as they go through a transaction, but also the agent's life cycle in their career. We're able to build tools that are not just cool. There's a lot of technology out there that people buy or build because it's cool. It's not just cool. We do it because we know it will help an agent sell as much real estate as possible. So that's really the goal, whether it's efficiency or exposure. Everything leading up to where I am now has built my experience level in being able to do that and help out properties continue to grow.
I love what you just said at the end there. Both taking your experience, actually transacting real estate and being an agent, and parlaying it into your current role, but also really sometimes you have to do the thing that's cool, and sometimes you have to just do the thing that works. One of the quotes I love, I forget who said it actually, is everyone remembers Steve Jobs. Nobody remembers who invented GPS, which I don't know, maybe you know, but yeah, that reminds me of that, because poor person who invented GPS. Think of how often we use that.
Right. That's a great point. I love that quote.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious. I mean, app properties is seen as one of the forefront just on the innovation side of things. Obviously, with platform you mentioned, and with a lot of the tools and technology that you have. So, how would you sort of describe the role that technology plays in app properties, and sort of what you see as the next phase of that?
Sure. I think technology, we engage with technology, not at app properties, but as an industry for different reasons. And I think there are two, and I kind of mentioned it, which is where, there's a consumer facing side of technology, and then there's also the agent or brokerage side of technology. And a lot of times what we miss as an industry is that we only focus on one. Well, if we're talking about CRMs or we're talking about transaction management, consumers don't care if their agent has a CRM. Consumers don't care if they have a transaction management system, right? So then what are we building to actually make the consumer's journey or experience more transparent, cleaner, clearer, more concise, to provide some clarity when they're only buying or selling every, 5, 7, 10 years. So that's where we're going with it. We already, our tools really heavily focus on both now, but I think where we're really looking to expand is on the consumer facing side. And it's what I said, which is looking for two things, actually: transparency and making the process smoother. And then the second is, one of the ways that we can maintain or extend the relationship between an agent and their client is outside of the transaction, is by helping them with home ownership. And the biggest way to do that is really reducing the cost of home ownership. So for us, we have a big focus on partnerships with third parties that do that, whether it's helping them reduce their homeowners insurance and in turn their auto insurance, whether it's helping them, be able to contest their property taxes when they're, unrightfully rising in relation to their neighborhood. So we're putting some things in place that with those partnerships where it's automated, where we are able to extend the relationship between the agent and the client by helping them actually save money.
I love that. And it's interesting. One of the things I've heard a lot of people say is that they see the real estate industry heading more in the direction of sort of marrying the traditional role with financial advice. And sort of that piece is becoming one of the reasons why, Gen Z and, all these people who people say, well, they're young, they're native techies. Like, why do they need to work with an agent? Well, agent commissions haven't decreased. I mean, if you look at the data, like the role an agent
Right.
plays is still, just like the role a financial institution plays, is still pretty prominent in these decisions. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we know from consumers, there was a Harris research study that showed that consumers do want a one-stop shop. And that's not to say that, boutiques or singular, niche stores are going to go away, but I think more and more people want to go to one place to get everything. And so it is in real estate, right? So if we can offer as a brokerage a way for consumers to access all of the other, whether it's financial tools, other resources, then we are the one-stop shop. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we miss. I don't want to transition into this necessarily because we could go down a rabbit hole, but in terms of title and mortgage, brokerages have had their own title and mortgage for a long time. But I don't know that it's always been leveraged in the right way. And that is something where when we talk about the one-stop shop, where there's a real impact to the brokerage first, because mortgage and title is very profitable. And for the agent, because they're able to offer a one-stop shop where they have more control over what they're giving to their client, because mortgage and title is in-house and possibly insurance and other affiliated or ancillary services.
Mhm. Yeah, and App Properties is one of the largest firms that's independent to do that too. So there's also that where there's the kind of ongoing battle of franchise versus independent, and a lot of people who are moving back in the independent direction, especially given the pandemic and some of the recent changes with some of the technology acquisitions. It's the promise of having something amazing hasn't necessarily manifested into a reality.
Right. Yeah, I think, and there's it's interesting about technology in real estate because technology has been in real estate for a long time. It's just that, recently there are players or a player that is really done a great job of marketing and talking about it and getting press about it. And I think it was a wake up call. So when we talk about that move, you mentioned the move back to indie brokerage. I think that, there's two sides to it. I think the tough part about being an independent brokerage is that you have to provide a lot. You have to provide a lot to your brokers, especially when there are players out there that are effectively, buying agents because they have a lot of cash. So, that puts a lot of pressure on indie brokers to how do you compete the value versus the money, the value that you provide to an agent for them to be able to sell as much real estate as possible. So I do think that there are some indie brokerages that are struggling, unfortunately, because they're in a market that has been hit by this, this fight, either splits or bonuses or whatever it might be. So, I think what most brokerages, indie or not, are looking for right now is that value piece, and how can they get there as quickly as possible and profitably. And it's tough because building technology or buying technology is expensive, and it's also, there's a lot of potential to make a bad decision in terms of what you do buy or build. Again, that cool factor. You might buy something because it's cool, but is it really impacting the agent's life or business? So back to the indie and, the indie side, I think there is this pushback to independent brokerage because people want control over what they offer, over what their, the value they do provide, but they're in a dilemma because they have to invest in their business to be able to retain and continue to grow and recruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Those economies of scale are so important also. And having good partnerships. And, I'm curious, thinking about ad properties because you've sort of reached that point of scale. Sometimes the downside of scale is you lose agility. And, in your role and talking about platform, being able to do the thing that works, even if it's not necessarily the shiniest thing, is equally as important. So do you have a process for sort of rolling out things to your agents and to their clients and having, beta testing or doing experimentation, or how does that work at properties?
Yeah, I think that's important to us. When I first came to Ad Properties, we were, I think there were 400 agents, and now we're nearing 3,000. Probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll exceed 3,000 agents. And so that's, when we talk about scaling, that's a big growth change. Clearly, it's more easy, it's easier to roll things out to 400 people than it is to 3,000 people across multiple states. So for us, when we look at our tools, we need adoption, right? Because otherwise the value isn't there. If agents don't adopt it, if they don't use it, there's no reason for them to, they don't see value in what we're providing at Ad Properties, and they would look elsewhere. That's where a higher split or a bonus or something else might draw them away. So when we talk about rolling out, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think there is a process. We have a plan in place. And it really, at a high level, it starts with making sure that management and ownership are on board, that everybody at that level understands what the technology is, what the tool is, or the marketing resources, and they're able to communicate what the value is because they're going to be asked. Then we roll it out to what we call the super users, which are the people that become the spokespeople within the company. Whether they're techie or not, they are the people that, we don't use the word demo or beta test necessarily because I think that gives perception that we may not continue to use it. So when we talk about adoption, if we want an agent to take the time to learn it and be our spokesperson, they have to feel like this tool is going to be around. And it's not just a test that we're doing for 2 months and then they're going to lose it after they spent a lot of time learning and using it. So we have our super users, and then we have it staged out depending on the tool. Either we roll to the entire company simultaneously or we stage it out in regions just to make distribution easier. And one of the cool things that our team here, our VP of Ops, our COO, when we talk about operations and staff, is that all of our staff are trained on all of our tools. So no matter who an agent goes to with questions, they're able to answer at least, at a basic level, the FAQs, the most common questions that come up. And that's where agents feel support, where they don't feel like and I just recently heard a story at a brokerage where someone asked a simple tool about the technology, and this was here in Chicago at another brokerage. They asked a simple question about the technology, and they were sent a 30-minute long YouTube video to watch that they had to filter through to figure out what portion of the video applied to their question. So, and clearly I had a conversation with the agent because they were looking to make a move, and they told me this story. So it's clear for us, we want to make sure that people feel supported. So part of that rollout is making sure that everyone on the team understands what and why and how it's going to impact their business. The what's in it for me is probably the biggest key. Because if you say to an, you have to explain why an agent would take the time to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love that. And I'm curious also if that is on the sort of ideation side. So, Rob Refkin famously has a feedback button on compass.com where any agent can submit feedback and, be considered for a feature request or whatever it is, or some tool they need. So I'm curious how you solicit feedback from your agents or the market or their clients.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we have a feedback button too. We've had it, since our platform has been around. We started building platform in effectively 2006. And we've always had a feedback button, and there are multiple places in there too. There's a suggestion box, and it goes to all of the people that can affect change. So, multiple times a day we get feedback, and that's really how our tools have improved. It's not what we think is best. It's not how we think we can improve it. It's really because our agents are using the tools, and then they say, hey, what about this? They send it in. And the cool thing about building versus buying, and I know it's not always possible to build versus buy, but one of the reasons that we do that is because we are able to implement those changes, where sometimes we've all been through it with vendors. You send a suggestion, we'll get to it. It's on the project list and it never happens, even though it's a viable, valuable suggestion. For us, a lot of times the suggestions come in and they're done within hours, with our dev team, where they're able to make those changes. Again, if they make sense and if they will improve the functionality or the experience with the agent.
So I'm curious, we touched on a little bit earlier, sort of the indie brokerage movement, but also the importance of economies of scale. Obviously, once you get to a certain point too, some of the goals that you have become a little different, right? It becomes more about profitability and efficiency and sort of getting, hey, if we can get, an extra 1% of our agents to be more productive or help them be more productive, that's the key. So I'm curious what success looks like for you in terms of metrics. Like what goals and KPIs are you looking at or are you setting, both for the agents, but also sort of the company at large?
Sure. I think our goals and our this mantra comes from Thad Wong, who's one of our founders and co-founders and co-owners. And he always says, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so the key is growth for us always. And it's interesting because we don't, there are certain metrics we use for growth, but a lot of times it's seizing the opportunity when it comes. One of the metrics we do use is in terms of new agent production within each office, where we have a certain percentage of total volume that should be added by new agents that have joined within the last 12 months. So that's a target we use to make sure that we're always recruiting producing agents. We're always bringing in quality agents that are, working hard. So that's a recruiting goal we have. But then also in terms of market growth, we go where the opportunity exists. So we don't plan out at the beginning of the year how many offices we're going to open. We don't plan out what regions or neighborhoods we want to move into. It happens when agents ask for us. And that's the neat thing about App Properties is we've never acquired another company in the Midwest. All the growth that I talked about from, when they started with 5 agents up to 3,000 has been organic. And it's all been through attraction. And it is when we start to attract agents in a specific area or region and they're asking for us, that's when we move there. We don't move there and expect agents to join us. They already want us. And that's really, really how we've grown, to the number 1 market share in Illinois, number 1 market share in Chicago, and in other markets as well.
I love that. That's really, it's funny. Usually you hear either people sort of go with their gut and they're intuitive and they're like, the numbers will come. You just have to trust the direction you're going. And then others who are super analytical, like I'm watching my competitor, I'm watching the market, I know my total share, I know the number of listings, I know all their statuses, and you're kind of in the middle. Like there's some things that you need to track and you need to know whether that initial sort of onboarding period is successful for someone, whether recruiting efforts are working. But then there's also other things that it's just about being opportunistic.
That's right. And not being afraid to make a move. I think that's part of the culture at App Properties too, and part of the innovation part, which is, the ability to take risks and the willingness to take risks based on what we know. So I wouldn't say it's not rolling the dice, it's not gambling, but I do think it is, taking what we do know that, what we're providing to agents, what their success has been so far in terms of recruiting, in terms of growing the company, and applying that to a different area where we know that, we will look at the competition. We will see what type of signage they have, what type of physical or digital brochures they have, what sort of exposure they're creating. And we know if we come in there, and we've done it time and time again. We moved into the North Shore. Speaking of risk, here's a great example of App Properties and our two owners, Mike and Thad. In 2009, during the downturn, is when we expanded and we started opening offices into the North Shore region of Chicago. It's a higher end market up there in the suburban market there. And so that's when we opened 4 or 5 offices during that time, during the downturn. And it was a big risk. But they had the foresight to see everyone else was retracting, contracting. They stopped marketing, they closed offices, they cut staff. And in turn, Thad and Mike decided to make a decision to open offices and grow and hire. And that's really how we became the #1 brokerage in the North Shore region, was because we took the opportunity then when we saw what everyone else was doing.
That's awesome. I love that. And obviously, there are some parallels to our current times. We're really excited at Union Street Media. We've been able to hire this year a few engineers and marketing people. So very, very exciting for a 35-person company, not the same as App Properties. And so I'm curious, sort of last couple of questions. Obviously someone like yourself, super, super smart, tons of experience in the space, really, really good channels for feedback, for innovation within the company. And, we're still in real estate, which is an industry that sometimes has been seen as lagging behind other industries. So I'm curious, how you feed your curiosity and your sort of personal need for information and learning, and whether it comes from the industry or whether you go to, fintech or other places where I think a lot of people draw inspiration.
Yeah, I typically, there are a lot of great leaders within the industry that I follow. But I think it's important to get outside of our industry, because there are so many parallels between other industries and ours and there are so many other resources out there. So for me, podcasts, and specifically, there are a few that are more longer, long format interviews with podcasts. So instead of the 15-minute, 20-minute interviews, they really get deep. An hour and a half long podcasts that are great for driving distance if you're stuck in traffic somewhere. But I think you can pull a lot out of that because they get deeper. And then also, books. So I'm still an old school book reader, meaning the physical, paper, hold it. Yes, I can't break it. I can't go to the electronic side. There's something about holding a book, but that's the other thing is, I have a goal, and this was a goal of mine a long time ago when I was actually in restaurants, and I've started it up again where I need to read at least 2 books a month. And so one of the ways, and many people do this, but it's not, instead of taking an hour to read a book, you just read 10 or 15 pages a day, every day at the same time. And it's amazing how quickly you can actually get through books and still retain it, even though you're reading for small chunks. And then the other thing that I've started doing is rereading books, which I think is also important, because the second time around, you have the ability to apply the takeaways, and it takes you less time to reread a book. But for me, yeah, I think I draw on a lot of different sources, and try and draw the parallels that apply to my role, the company, and specifically to agents to be able to share what I learn with them to help them grow and understand as well.
Well, and you need content for your next daily show because if it's happening every day.
That is correct. Yes, a lot of content development.
That's awesome. Well, Kevin, this has been awesome. Last question before I let you go. Share with our audience something fun about you that most people don't know.
Interesting. What could it be? I was a college cheerleader at University of Illinois. And some people say that when I tell them this, they can see it because I'm sort of the coach, the high energy person in the office, and with that properties. But yeah, that's something, college cheerleader that most people don't know about me.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, I feel like, yeah, that makes you a natural shoe-in for your current role. And I really appreciate, again, Kevin, all your insight you've given us. I'm here with Kevin Van Eck, EVP of Innovation and Education at Properties, one of the most well-known and fastest growing brokerages in the country. Congratulations on all your success. And thank you for starring on the Future of Real Estate series with us, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Thanks for having me. This was fun.